The war had been going on for 300 years. The Galactic Council was tired. Their ships were broken. Their soldiers were dying. The enemy, called the Vrix Empire, was just as tired, but neither side would give up. They fought over planets, over resources, over old insults that nobody even remembered anymore. The fighting never stopped. Commander Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of his warship, looking at the star maps. Red dots showed where the enemy was. Blue dots showed Council forces. There were too many red dots, not enough blue ones. His people, the Ashiri, could read minds and talk without speaking. They were smart and peaceful. But smart and peaceful wasn't winning this war. The Luminians were made of pure energy. They could move through walls and didn't need food or water. But the Vrix had learned to trap them in special containers. The Krell were like giant insects with hard shells and many arms. They were strong fighters, but the Vrix were stronger. Every advantage the Council had, the Vrix found a way to counter it. Every weapon the Council made, the Vrix made a better one. It was endless. 3 days ago, Hyun-woo received new orders from the Council. The orders made him feel confused and a little bit angry. The Council wanted him to go to a planet called Earth. They wanted him to ask a species called humans for help. Hyun-woo had never heard of humans before. Nobody had. They were new to space travel. They had only invented faster-than-light engines 5 years ago. What could such a primitive species do to help? But orders were orders. Hyun-woo took his ship to the edge of the galaxy where Earth was located. It was a small blue planet with one moon. Sensors showed it was covered in water and land. There were over 8 billion humans living there. That was a lot of beings for one planet. The Ashiri homeworld only had 2 billion people, and it was considered crowded. When Hyun-woo's ship appeared in Earth's space, the humans noticed immediately. Their military sent messages in 100 different languages. Hyun-woo's computer translated them all. Most of them said the same thing: identify yourself or be destroyed. Hyun-woo was surprised. The humans didn't ask who he was. They didn't request peaceful contact. Their first response was a threat. Maybe this wouldn't be a wasted trip after all. He sent a message back explaining he came in peace on behalf of the Galactic Council. Within an hour, a human ship launched from Earth. It was small and looked fragile compared to Council vessels. But it moved fast, very fast. The pilot flew with aggressive confidence, doing spins and sharp turns that would make most species sick. The ship pulled alongside Hyun-woo's vessel, and a voice came through the communication system. "This is Captain Ji-won of the Earth Defense Force. Permission to come aboard?" The human spoke clearly and directly. No formal greetings, no diplomatic ceremony. Just straight to the point. Hyun-woo granted permission and watched as the human ship docked with his. Captain Ji-won walked into his bridge 5 minutes later. Hyun-woo studied her carefully. She was small, much smaller than him. Her body looked soft and weak. She had no claws, no scales, no natural armor. Her skin was smooth and easy to damage. She wore a blue uniform with many symbols on it. Her eyes were dark and sharp, constantly moving, taking in everything around her. Those eyes made Hyun-woo uncomfortable. They were predator eyes. "Welcome aboard, Captain Ji-won," Hyun-woo said, trying to be polite. "I am Commander Hyun-woo of the Ashiri fleet. The Galactic Council needs Earth's help." Ji-won looked at him without any expression. "You're in a war. We've been monitoring your communications for 2 years now, 300 years of fighting. That's a long time. Why do you need us? We're new to all this." Hyun-woo felt embarrassed. He didn't have a good answer. "The Council believes fresh perspectives might help break the stalemate. Your species is different from ours." "Different how?" Ji-won asked. Hyun-woo didn't know what to say. He decided to be honest. "We don't know yet. That's why I'm here. The Council wants to meet with Earth's leaders. They want to see if humans can contribute to the war effort." Ji-won nodded slowly. "And if we say no?" Then I leave, and we never speak again. Hyun-woo tried to read her thoughts, using his telepathic abilities. But there was nothing. Her mind was closed, locked tight. That was strange. Most species couldn't block a Shiri telepathy. Can I ask you something, Captain? Why can't I read your mind? Ji-won smiled for the first time. It wasn't a friendly smile. We know about telepathy. We've been preparing for first contact for decades. All our military personnel are trained to guard their thoughts. You didn't think we'd let aliens read our minds, did you? Hyun-woo felt a chill run through his body. These humans had never met another species before, but they were already preparing defenses against them. What kind of species did that? What kind of beings assumed that first contact would be hostile? I'll take your message to my government, Ji-won said. Wait here. We'll have an answer in 24 hours. True to her word, 24 hours later, Ji-won returned. Earth had agreed to send a delegation to the Galactic Council. 50 human representatives would travel to the Council homeworld to learn about the war and decide if they would help. The journey took 3 weeks. During that time, Hyun-woo talked with the human delegates. He learned things that disturbed him deeply. Humans had no unified government until recently. For most of their history, they had been divided into hundreds of different nations, all fighting each other. They had invented nuclear weapons and nearly destroyed themselves. They had fought wars that killed millions of their own people. Their entire history was violence, conflict, and struggle. But they had also invented art, music, and philosophy. They wrote stories about peace and love. They built hospitals and schools. They explored their world and tried to understand the universe. They were walking contradictions, capable of great kindness and terrible cruelty at the same time. When they finally arrived at the Council homeworld, Hyun-woo watched as the human delegates stepped off their ship. The other council members stared at them. These small, weak-looking beings were supposed to help win the war. Most council members looked skeptical. Some looked amused. A few looked concerned as if they sensed something dangerous. The head of the council, an ancient Luminian named Kor-El, spoke first. Welcome, humans of Earth. We are grateful you have come. Our war with the Vrix Empire has cost countless lives. We hope you can offer new strategies to help us achieve victory. General Taemin stepped forward from the human group. He was an older male with gray hair and scars on his face. We've reviewed all the information you provided about this war. We've studied your tactics, your weapons, your history with the Vrix. We believe we can help you win. How? Kor-El asked. Taemin's expression didn't change. By doing what humans do best, by fighting. The council chamber fell silent. Then Kor-El spoke again, his energy form flickering with uncertainty. But you are such a young species. You have no experience with galactic warfare. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. What makes you think you can succeed where we have failed? General Taemin looked at each council member slowly. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, but everyone heard it clearly. Because for humans, war isn't something we do. War is something we are. We've been fighting since we learned to pick up stones. We've never stopped. We've turned it into science, into art, into philosophy. You've been fighting one war for 300 years. We've fought thousands of wars in that same time. So yes, we can help you win. The question is, are you ready for what that means? Nobody answered. Hyun-woo looked at the other council members and saw what he felt. Fear. Not fear of the Vrix. Fear of what they had just invited into their war. Fear of humanity. The Galactic Council decided to test the humans before letting them join the war. They needed to know what these strange beings could really do. Scientist Da-eun was chosen to lead the assessment team. She was a Krell with 6 arms and a brilliant mind for understanding how different species worked. She had studied thousands of alien races, but humans confused her from the very first day. Da-Un started with basic physical tests. She measured human strength, speed, and endurance. The results were disappointing. Humans were weak compared to most galactic species. A Krell could lift 5 times more weight. A Vrix warrior had armor-like skin that could stop energy blasts. Humans had soft flesh that could be cut easily. They couldn't breathe in toxic atmospheres. They needed a very specific temperature range to survive. They seemed fragile and limited. But then Da-Un tested their stamina. She made humans run on machines that measured how long they could keep moving. Most species could sprint very fast for short periods, then needed long rest. Humans were different. They ran at a medium speed and just kept going, and going, and going. After 2 hours, Da-Un stopped the test because she thought the machine was broken. It wasn't. The humans could literally run for hours without stopping. One human, a soldier named Boram, ran for 6 hours straight just to prove a point. Da-Un wrote in her report, "Humans are persistence hunters. They don't chase prey by being faster. They chase it until it dies from exhaustion. This is a terrifying evolutionary trait." Next came intelligence tests. Humans scored well but not exceptional. They were smart, but the Ashiri were smarter. They were creative, but the Luminians were more creative. What made humans different was how they thought. When Da-Un gave them problems to solve, humans always found the most violent solution first. She showed them a simulation of a locked door and asked how to get through it. The Ashiri suggested telepathically convincing whoever was inside to open it. The Luminians suggested phasing through the wall. The humans suggested breaking the door down, or blowing it up, or cutting through it with tools. When Da-Un said the door was too strong to break, a human engineer named Jae-Sung said, "Then we'll collapse the entire wall around it." Violence was always their first answer. But it wasn't mindless violence. It was calculated, practical violence. They didn't fight because they were angry. They fought because it worked. The weapons test shocked everyone. Da-Un showed humans the standard council weapons: energy rifles that shot plasma bolts, sonic disruptors that shattered objects with sound waves, neural stunners that knocked out enemies without killing them. The humans examined each weapon carefully. Then General Tae-min asked a question that made Da-Un's blood run cold. "Do you have kinetic weapons?" Da-Un didn't understand. "What are kinetic weapons?" Tae-min picked up a small metal ball from a nearby table and threw it hard across the room. It hit the wall with a loud bang and left a dent. "That's kinetic force, mass times acceleration, simple physics. You shoot a piece of metal very fast at a target. It penetrates armor, breaks bones, destroys equipment. You're telling me in 300 years of war, nobody thought to just shoot bullets?" Da-Un felt stupid. Of course, kinetic weapons existed. They were primitive, ancient technology. The Council had stopped using them thousands of years ago because energy weapons were more efficient, more precise, more civilized. But as she thought about it, she realized something disturbing. Kinetic weapons didn't need power cells. They didn't have electronic parts that could be jammed. They were simple, reliable, and brutal. The Vrix had never developed defenses against them because nobody used them anymore. The humans brought their own weapons to show the Council. Da-Un watched as they demonstrated firearms, missiles, explosives, and something they called a flamethrower that shot burning liquid. Every weapon was designed to cause maximum damage to living targets. There was nothing elegant about them. They were tools made for killing, and humans had thousands of different designs. Medical Officer Hyo-Rin explained human combat medicine to Da-Un. Most species in the galaxy had sophisticated healing technology. Injuries were treated with regeneration fields or cellular reconstruction. Humans had something different. They had battlefield medicine. Hyo-Rin showed Da-Un a medical kit that contained bandages, needles, chemical drugs, and surgical tools. "We can't regrow limbs in minutes like you can," Hyo-Rin explained. "So we developed ways to keep damaged bodies fighting. We can inject stimulants that block pain. We can seal wounds temporarily with chemical foam. We can even restart a stopped heart with electrical shocks. Our goal isn't to heal soldiers perfectly. Our goal is to keep them alive and fighting until the battle is over. We fix them properly later." Da-Un was horrified. "You send injured soldiers back into combat?" "If they can still fight, yes," Hyo-Rin said calmly. "A soldier with one arm can still shoot a rifle. A soldier with a broken leg can still operate a weapons console. We use every resource we have." The psychological evaluation was the most disturbing part. Da-Un worked with an Ashiri mind reader named Hyun-Woo to study how humans thought during combat simulations. They put humans in virtual reality situations where they had to fight against impossible odds. Most species would surrender or retreat when defeat was certain. Humans didn't. They fought until the simulation killed them, then asked to do it again so they could try a different strategy. Lieutenant Wu Jin did one simulation 15 times. Each time he died. Each time he tried something new. On the 16th attempt, he won by using a tactic so ruthless that Da-Un had to stop the simulation. He had used civilian hostages as human shields while planting explosives in a hospital. When Da-Un asked him why, he said simply, "You asked me to win. You didn't say how." Hyun-Woo pulled Da-Un aside after that test. "I've been reading human thoughts during these simulations. What I'm sensing terrifies me. When we fight, we feel fear, anger, sadness. Humans feel those things too, but they also feel something else. They feel excitement. They enjoy the challenge. Combat makes them feel alive. Fighting stimulates their brains the same way that art or music stimulates ours. They've evolved to be rewarded for violence." Da-Un compiled all the data into a final report for the council. She presented her findings in the council chamber with all the representatives watching. She showed them graphs, videos, test results, and analyses. When she finished, the room was silent for a long time. Finally, Kor-El spoke. "So what is your recommendation, Scientist Da-Un? Should we accept human help in this war?" Da-Un chose her words carefully. "Humans have no natural advantages. They're not particularly strong, fast, or intelligent compared to us. But they have something we don't have. They have 10,000 years of continuous warfare in their history. They've never stopped fighting, not for a single generation. War has shaped their biology, their culture, their technology, and their thinking. Every aspect of human civilization is built around conflict." "That sounds like a species we should avoid," another council member said. "Perhaps," Da-Un agreed. "But we're not looking for friends. We're looking for soldiers, and humans are the most naturally effective soldiers I've ever studied. They don't fight to survive. They survive to fight. The Vrix Empire has been our enemy for 300 years, and we still try to minimize casualties, to follow rules of engagement, to fight honorably. Humans don't care about any of that. They care about winning." General Taemin had been sitting quietly in the corner, listening. Now he stood up and walked to the center of the chamber. "You've tested us for 3 months. You've studied us, measured us, and evaluated us. Now let me tell you what we've learned about you. You're losing this war because you're afraid to fight it properly. You're afraid of casualties. You're afraid of looking like the bad guys. You're afraid of doing what's necessary to win. We're not." "Are you saying we're cowards?" one of the council members asked angrily. "No," Taemin replied. "I'm saying you're civilized. You've evolved beyond violence as a survival trait. That's good for building a peaceful society, but it's bad for winning wars. The Vrix haven't evolved beyond violence. Neither have we. That's why we can beat them." Kor-El's energy form flickered with uncertainty. And what do you want in return for your help? Simple, Taemin said. We fight our own way. We use our own tactics. We command our own forces. You provide us with intelligence, supplies, and support. But you don't tell us how to do our job. You want to win this war? Then let us do what humans do best. The council voted. It took 3 days of debate. Some members argued that humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent. Others argued that they were out of options. The Vrix were getting stronger while the council grew weaker. They needed something to change the balance. In the end, the vote passed. Humanity would join the war. Da-Yun watched as the first human warships began arriving at Council space stations. 50 vessels, each carrying thousands of soldiers and enough weapons to level a planet. She thought about her report, about all the tests and studies. She had tried to warn the Council about what they were unleashing. As the human fleet prepared for their first deployment, Da-Eun felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not fear of the Vrix. Fear of what would happen when humanity started fighting. Because she knew one thing for certain. The war was about to change, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Admiral Sung Ho stood on the bridge of the EDFS Indomitable, watching the stars stream past as his fleet moved toward their first battle. 50 human warships, all brand new, all equipped with weapons the galaxy had never seen before. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. No one spoke unless necessary. No one showed fear. They had trained for this moment for months. The mission was simple on paper. A Vrix blockade was preventing Council supply ships from reaching a colony world called Taros 5. 200 Vrix warships surrounded the planet, enough firepower to destroy any fleet the Council could send. The Council had tried 3 times to break through. Each time they failed with massive casualties. Now it was humanity's turn. Commander Hyun Woo and scientist Da-Eun were aboard the Indomitable as observers. The Council wanted to watch how humans fought. They stood at the back of the bridge, trying to stay out of the way. Da-Eun noticed something strange. The human crew seemed relaxed. Some were drinking coffee. Others were checking personal photos of their families. Didn't they understand they were about to face an enemy force 4 times their size? "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, "we're approaching the Taros system. Enemy fleet detected, confirming 203 Vrix vessels in defensive formation around the planet." "Confirmed," Sung Ho said calmly. "Weapons status? All railguns loaded and charged, missile tubes ready, fighter craft armed and standing by." "Good. Send a message to all ships. Execute battle plan Delta 7. Authorization code Broken Arrow." Da-Yun didn't understand the code words, but she saw the effect they had. Every human on the bridge sat up straighter. Their relaxed attitude vanished, replaced by focused intensity. Within seconds, the entire fleet changed formation, spreading out in a pattern that looked random but clearly wasn't. The Vrix noticed them immediately, their communications channels filled with chatter. Da-Yun's translator picked up their words. The Vrix commanders were laughing. They saw 50 small ships approaching and thought it was another pathetic council attempt. Some Vrix were even betting on how quickly they could destroy the human fleet. Sung Ho heard the transmissions and smiled coldly. "Let them laugh. Tactical. How long until we're in range?" 3 minutes, sir." "Helm, increase speed to maximum. I want to be on top of them before they finish their jokes." The human ships accelerated hard, much faster than the Vrix expected. Their wedge formation suddenly made sense. They were diving straight into the center of the Vrix blockade, like a spear thrust into flesh. The Vrix stopped laughing and started shooting. Energy beams filled the space around the human fleet. Plasma bolts exploded against shields. The first human ship took damage, its shields flaring bright blue as they absorbed the hits. Then the second ship, then the third. But the humans didn't slow down or turn away. They kept charging forward. "Shields at 60%. a crew member reported. "Maintain course," Sung-ho ordered. "Weapons, stand by for firing solution Alpha." Hyunwoo couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Admiral, you're taking too much damage. You need to fall back and regroup." Sung-ho didn't even look at him. "With respect, Commander, this is not your battle. Watch and learn." The human fleet punched through the Vrik's front line, and suddenly they were in the middle of the enemy formation. The Vrik ships tried to turn and track them, but they were too close now. Their big guns couldn't aim properly at targets that were right next to them. It was brilliant and insane at the same time. "Now," Sung-ho said quietly. Every human ship opened fire at once, but they weren't using energy weapons like the Vriks expected. They were using railguns, massive magnetic cannons that fired solid metal slugs at incredible speed. The slugs punched through Vrik shields like they weren't even there. One slug hit a Vrik's cruiser and went straight through it, coming out the other side. The cruiser exploded in a ball of fire. The Vrik's commanders started screaming orders. They had no defense against kinetic weapons. Their shields were designed to stop energy attacks, not solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. 3 more Vrik ships exploded, then 5 more. The humans were tearing through them. "Launch fighters," Sung-ho ordered. Bays opened on the human ships and small craft poured out. Fighter pilot Yu-jin led her squadron straight at a Vrik's carrier. The carrier launched its own fighters to intercept. Vrik's fighters were bigger and heavier, with more firepower. But they were slow. Human fighters were small and fast, performing turns that should have killed their pilots. Yu-jin felt the G-forces trying to crush her, but her flight suit squeezed her body, keeping blood flowing to her brain. She dived under a Vrik's fighter, spun upside down, and fired her rotary cannon. The Vrik's fighter exploded. Her wingman took out another. Within minutes, the space around the carrier was filled with debris. "Target the carrier's flight deck," Yu-jin ordered. "Burn it down." Her squadron hit the carrier with missiles and cannon fire, destroying the landing bays. Dozens of Vrik's fighters that were trying to land couldn't. They floated in space, running out of fuel while their carrier burned. On the Indomitable, Da-un watched the battle displays in horror and fascination. The humans were everywhere at once, moving in coordinated patterns that seemed chaotic, but were actually precisely planned. They used debris from destroyed ships as cover. They fired missiles that didn't explode on impact, but instead attached to enemy hulls and detonated seconds later, maximizing damage. They targeted specific systems on Vrik's ships, crippling them rather than destroying them, because crippled ships got in the way of healthy ones. "Admiral," the tactical officer said, "enemy flagship is trying to withdraw." "Don't let it," Sung-ho replied. "All ships, focus fire on that flagship. I want it dead." 20 human warships turned their attention to the Vrik's flagship. It was massive, 3 times the size of any human vessel, with shields that could withstand direct hits from capital ship weapons. But the humans didn't care. They just kept shooting. Railgun slugs hammered the shields over and over. Missiles struck in waves. The flagship's shields flickered, failed, and collapsed. "Now," Sung-ho said, "fire the lance." The Indomitable fired a weapon the Vriks had never seen before. It was a focused particle beam, powered by a small fusion reactor. The beam hit the flagship's bridge and burned straight through it. The flagship's lights went dark. It started to drift, dead in space. The Vrik's fleet broke. Without their flagship giving orders, the individual captains panicked. Some tried to run, some tried to keep fighting, some just floated there, not knowing what to do. The humans hunted them all down methodically, one by one. When it was over, 147 Vrik's ships were destroyed or disabled. 53 managed to escape by jumping to faster-than-light speed. The humans had lost 15 ships and suffered damage to 20 more. 4,000 human soldiers died, but they had won. Sung-ho stood in front of the main view screen, looking at the debris field that used to be the Vrik's blockade. His expression didn't change. He didn't celebrate. He just turned to his crew and said, "Damage report. Casualty count. Salvage operations. We have work to do." Da-Un watched the human crew go back to their duties. No one was cheering. No one looked happy. They acted like they had just finished a normal day's work, not a battle that would be studied for generations. She looked at Hyunwoo, who was staring at the view screen with wide eyes. "They're not like us," Hyunwoo whispered. "We fight to survive. They survive to fight." A human officer named Minna approached them. She was covered in sweat and had a small cut on her forehead from when the ship took damage. She smiled politely at them. "Sorry you had to see that. First battles are always messy. We'll get cleaner as we learn their tactics." "Cleaner?" Da-Un couldn't help but ask. "You just destroyed a fleet 4 times your size." Minna shrugged. "We took too many casualties. 15 ships is too many. We'll analyze what went wrong and do better next time." She paused, then added, "Oh, and tell your council that Taros 5 is clear. Supply ships can proceed." She walked away, already talking into her radio about repair schedules and ammunition counts. Da-Un realized something that made her feel cold inside. To the humans, this hadn't been a great victory. It had been an acceptable result. They expected to do better. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. The Council was shocked. The Vrix were shocked. Every species that heard about it was shocked. A tiny human fleet had broken a blockade that the combined Council forces couldn't touch. They had lost ships and soldiers, but they had won decisively. In the Vrix Empire, military commanders received the battle reports and didn't believe them at first. They thought it was Council propaganda. When they saw the actual recordings, they went quiet. One Vrix general named Krath watched the footage of human fighters performing impossible maneuvers and said something that would spread throughout the Empire. "What kind of species builds machines that can kill their own pilots?" Another general answered quietly, "A species that cares more about winning than surviving." The Vrix Empire issued new orders to all fleet commanders. If you encounter human ships, request reinforcements immediately. Do not engage without overwhelming numerical superiority. Do not underestimate them. Do not assume you understand their tactics. But the most important order was the one that wasn't written down officially. It was the order that spread from commander to commander in quiet conversations. The order that changed everything. Be afraid of the humans. Be very afraid. On the Indomitable, Admiral Sung-Ho read the intelligence reports about Vrix communications. He saw the fear spreading through enemy ranks. He nodded to himself, satisfied. Fear was a weapon, just like railguns and missiles, maybe even more effective. He looked at his crew and felt pride. They had done their job. They had shown the galaxy what humans could do. This was just the beginning. There were many more battles to fight, many more enemies to defeat. But he knew his people were ready, because humans had been preparing for this war their entire existence. Every war they fought on Earth, every soldier who died, every weapon they invented, it had all led to this moment. Humanity had finally found a war worth fighting, and they were going to win it. The mining colony on Argos 7 had been under Vrix control for 8 years. The planet was rich in rare metals needed for ship construction, which made it valuable to both sides. The Council had tried to retake it 4 times over those 8 years. Each attempt ended in disaster. The last assault cost 100,000 Council soldiers their lives, and they never got past the outer defenses. The Vrix had turned Argos 7 into a fortress. Every building was reinforced. Every tunnel had defensive positions. The Vrix warriors stationed there were experienced veterans who had fought off multiple attacks. They knew every trick the Council would try. Their commander, a scarred veteran named Throck, boasted that no army could take Argos 7 as long as he commanded it. Then Colonel Minna arrived with 5,000 human soldiers. She stood on the bridge of the transport ship, looking down at the planet below. It looked peaceful from orbit, just gray rock and scattered buildings, but she knew better. Intelligence reports said there were 15,000 Vrix warriors down there, dug in and ready to fight. The council observers who came with her looked worried. One of them, an Ashiri captain named Keybomb, spoke up. "Colonel, perhaps we should request more troops. 5,000 against 15,000 seems unwise." Minna didn't take her eyes off the planet. "We have enough. More soldiers just means more people getting in each other's way. In ground combat, quality matters more than quantity. But the Vrix have superior defensive positions. They know the terrain. They have expectations," Minna interrupted. "They expect us to attack the same way the Council did. Land at the spaceport, advance toward the main mining complex, fight our way through their defensive lines. That's what they're prepared for. So we're going to do something different." The human assault began at night. Instead of landing at the spaceport, the human ships dropped pods all over the planet. Small teams of soldiers landed in dozens of different locations, far from the main Vrix strongholds. The Vrix commanders were confused. This wasn't how military assaults worked. You were supposed to secure a landing zone, establish a base, then advance. The humans were scattered and disorganized. That's what the Vrix thought. They were wrong. Sergeant Dong Hyun led a team of 20 soldiers into a ventilation shaft on the outskirts of the main complex. His team moved quietly through the dark tunnels, using night vision goggles to see. They found a junction where power cables ran through the walls. Engineer Jae Sung examined the cables carefully, then planted explosive charges on them. "Charges set," Jae Sung whispered. "On your order, Sergeant." "Hold," Dong Hyun replied. "We wait for the signal." All across the planet, human teams were doing similar things. They weren't attacking the Vrix defenses directly. They were targeting infrastructure, power stations, water processing plants, communication towers, supply depots. They found the weak points in the Vrix fortress and hit them all at once. When Minna gave the signal, chaos erupted. Explosions rippled across Argos 7 as human teams blew up their targets simultaneously. Lights went out. Communications went down. Alarms started blaring. The Vrix warriors rushed to their defensive positions, expecting a frontal assault. But no attack came. Instead, the humans attacked from inside. While the Vrix were focused on external defenses, human teams infiltrated the tunnels beneath the mining complex. They used maps stolen from Council intelligence archives, maps that showed all the maintenance tunnels the Vrix didn't bother guarding. Within hours, human soldiers were inside the fortress, behind enemy lines. Throck realized what was happening too late. By the time he tried to reorganize his forces, humans were everywhere. Small teams appeared in corridors, fired quick bursts from their rifles, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. They planted explosives in ammunition storage areas. They sabotaged mining equipment. They poisoned water supplies with chemicals that made Vrix warriors sick but didn't kill them, because sick soldiers needed care, and that tied up more resources than dead ones. Medic Hyo-Rin worked in a captured medical facility, treating injured human soldiers. A Vrix warrior stumbled in, confused and disoriented. His translator was broken, but he was clearly asking for help. He had a deep wound in his side. Hyo-Rin could have killed him easily. Instead, she treated his wound, gave him water, and left him tied up in a corner. When Keybomb saw this, he asked, "Why help the enemy?" Hyo-Rin bandaged another human soldier while she answered. "That Vrix warrior will tell his friends that humans showed him mercy. It plants doubt, makes them wonder if they're fighting for the right side. Psychological warfare is just as important as physical warfare." The battle turned into a nightmare for the Vrix. They couldn't find the humans in the tunnels. Their superior numbers meant nothing when they couldn't locate the enemy. Every corridor could hide an ambush. Every room could contain explosives. The Vrix stopped advancing and started defending, guarding key positions instead of hunting the humans. That's exactly what Minna wanted. On day 3, she gave a new order. All teams, prepare for final assault. Target is Throck's command center. We're going to cut off the head. Lieutenant Wu Jin led the assault team. His squad of 50 soldiers moved through the tunnels toward the command center at the heart of the complex. They knew the Vrix would be guarding it heavily. They didn't care. Wu Jin had studied Vrix defensive tactics and found a weakness. The Vrix relied on their natural armor and strength. They expected enemies to fight them directly. Humans had no intention of being fair. The command center was protected by 300 Vrix warriors, the best fighters Throck had. They stood in defensive positions, weapons ready, confident that no force could break through. Then the walls exploded. Wu Jin's team had planted explosives in the walls surrounding the command center. When they detonated, entire sections of corridor collapsed. Dust and debris filled the air. Vrix warriors stumbled, blinded and confused. That's when the humans attacked. They didn't fight honorably. They used flashbang grenades that blinded the Vrix. They used smoke grenades that made it impossible to see. They wore gas masks and pumped irritant chemicals into the air that made Vrix eyes water and throats burn. While the Vrix warriors coughed and stumbled, humans shot them from the darkness. It was brutal. It was unfair. It was effective. Wu Jin reached Throck's personal chamber and kicked down the door. Throck stood there, a massive Vrix warrior covered in scars, holding a weapon that could punch through tank armor. He roared a challenge and fired. Wu Jin dived behind a desk. The energy blast melted the metal, but Wu Jin was already moving. He didn't try to match Throck's strength. Instead, he threw a flashbang grenade. The room exploded with light. Throck screamed and covered his eyes. Wu Jin shot him in the leg with a rifle set to fully automatic. Throck fell. Wu Jin kicked the weapon away and pointed his rifle at Throck's head. "Surrender," Wu Jin said in the Vrix language, which he had learned specifically for this mission. "Surrender and your warriors live. Fight and they all die. Choose now." Throck looked at the small human standing over him. His pride wanted to keep fighting. But he had seen what these humans could do. They fought without honor, without mercy, without hesitation. And they won. He made his choice. "I surrender." Wu Jin spoke into his radio. "Command center secured. Enemy commander captured. All units cease fire and accept surrenders." The battle for Argos 7 ended on day 4. Of the 15,000 Vrix warriors who defended the planet, 3,000 were dead, 5,000 were wounded, and 7,000 surrendered. The human casualties were 800 dead and 1,200 wounded. By any measure, it was a stunning victory. But what shocked the galaxy wasn't the victory itself. It was how the humans won. They didn't fight like soldiers, they fought like hunters. They used deception, sabotage, psychological warfare, and tactics that most species considered dishonorable. They attacked weak points instead of strong ones. They targeted infrastructure instead of armies. They won by making their enemies afraid to fight. Council observers wrote detailed reports about the battle. Scientist Da-Un studied the human tactics and realized something disturbing. Everything the humans did was standard military doctrine on Earth. This wasn't special forces or elite units. This was how all human soldiers were trained to fight. The entire species thought this way. News of Argos 7 spread through the Vrix Empire like wildfire. Soldiers who heard about it started questioning their orders. If Throck, the unbeatable defender, could fall to humans, what chance did regular soldiers have? Morale started to crack. Some units refused to deploy to worlds where humans were operating. The Vrix High Command held an emergency meeting. They watched recordings of the battle, seeing human soldiers appearing in tunnels like ghosts, setting traps, using weapons that most civilized species had banned as too cruel. One commander suggested using chemical weapons against the humans, fighting fire with fire. Another commander stopped him. No, if we do that, the humans will respond in kind. And based on what we've seen, their chemical weapons are probably worse than ours. We can't win an escalation war against a species that's been fighting itself for 10,000 years. They've already thought of every horrible thing we might do, and they've invented worse. The meeting ended with no clear solution. The Vrix Empire had superior numbers, better technology, and more resources. But none of that mattered if their soldiers were too afraid to fight effectively. On Argos 7, Colonel Min-Ah walked through the captured complex, inspecting the damage. Her soldiers were already starting repairs, getting the mining equipment working again. Council representatives arrived to thank her for the victory. She accepted their gratitude politely, but seemed distracted. Keybomb noticed her expression. "Something wrong, Colonel? You won a great victory." Min-Ah looked at him. "We won one planet. The Vrix control hundreds. This war is far from over. We've proven humans can fight. Now we need to prove we can win the entire war. And that's going to take a lot more than clever tactics." She walked away, already planning the next operation. Keybomb watched her go and felt a chill. The humans had just won their second major victory. They had shown they could fight in space and on the ground. They had proven themselves as warriors. But Min-Ah was right. The war was far from over. And as news of human victories spread, both the Council and the Vrix were beginning to realize the same thing. Humanity wasn't just another species that could fight. They were a species that lived for fighting. They studied it, perfected it, and found meaning in it. They turned warfare into an art form. And now that art form was being demonstrated on a galactic stage. The Vrix Empire had fought the Council for 300 years without fear. Now, for the first time, they were learning what fear felt like, and they were learning it from the smallest, weakest, most fragile species in the galaxy. The species that refused to give up. The species that always found a way to win. The species called humans. Stories spread across the galaxy like a virus. Every species, every world, every soldier heard the tales of what humans could do. Some stories were true. Some were exaggerated. Some were completely made up. But they all had the same effect. They made people afraid. Sergeant Dong Hyun became famous after Argos 7. The story went that he held a defensive position alone for 6 hours while his team evacuated wounded soldiers. 300 Vrix warriors attacked him. He killed them all using nothing but salvaged weapons and improvised explosives. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found him still fighting, surrounded by enemy bodies, covered in wounds but refusing to fall. The truth was less dramatic, but somehow more impressive. Dong Hyun had held the position for 6 hours. That part was true. But only 50 Vrix attacked. Not 300. He killed 12 of them. The rest retreated because they thought they were walking into a trap. One human holding a position alone didn't make sense to them, so they assumed he had hidden support. They left rather than risk an ambush. When someone asked Dong Hyun about it later, he shrugged. "I just did my job. Any soldier would have done the same." That attitude, that casual acceptance of what seemed impossible to others, was what truly frightened the galaxy. Humans didn't think they were doing anything special. They thought this was normal. Pilot Sora's story spread even further. She was shot down over enemy territory during a bombing run. Her fighter crashed in a Vrix-controlled sector. Everyone assumed she was dead. Standard procedure was to assume downed pilots wouldn't survive more than a few hours behind enemy lines. The Council had lost thousands of pilots that way. 3 weeks later, Sora walked into a human forward base, dirty and exhausted but alive. She had survived by stealing Vrix supplies, sabotaging their equipment, and avoiding patrols. She destroyed 6 supply depots, killed 24 enemy soldiers, and gathered intelligence on Vrix troop movements. When someone asked how she survived, she said, "I had survival training. This is what we're taught to do. The Vrick soldiers in that sector started seeing ghosts. Every unexplained equipment failure, every missing supply crate, every soldier who disappeared on patrol, they blamed on humans hiding in the shadows. Even after Sora left, the paranoia remained. The Vricks started guarding their own bases like they were under constant siege, wasting resources protecting against an enemy that wasn't even there anymore. The psychological impact was devastating. Vrick's commanders started receiving reports of their soldiers refusing to go on patrol alone. They demanded backup for simple supply runs. They shot at shadows and empty corridors. The fear was spreading faster than any weapon could. But the story that truly changed everything involved Lieutenant Wu Jin and the Crimson Guard. The Crimson Guard were the Vrick's Empire's most elite warriors. They had never lost a battle. Never. They were selected from birth, trained from childhood, and equipped with the best armor and weapons the Empire could provide. Each Crimson Guard had killed at least 100 enemies in combat. They were legends, myths, the ultimate soldiers of the Vrick's Empire. The Vrick's High Command decided to send a Crimson Guard unit to prove that humans could be beaten. They chose a classified council research station called Outpost Meridian. Intelligence suggested humans were developing new weapons there. The mission was simple: infiltrate the station, destroy the research, and kill everyone inside. Show the galaxy that humans weren't invincible. 100 Crimson Guard warriors deployed to Outpost Meridian in stealth ships. They landed without being detected and approached the base silently. Everything went according to plan. Then they met Wu Jin's Special Operations Team. Wu Jin had 20 soldiers, 20 against 100 of the best warriors in the Vrick's Empire. The odds should have been impossible, but Wu Jin didn't fight fair. He knew the Crimson Guard would come at night, so he prepared during the day. His team set up sensors, planted traps, and created false positions that looked like real defenses. They made a map of every approach to the station and planned for each one. When the Crimson Guard arrived, Wu Jin already knew exactly where they were. The first Crimson Guard died to a mine buried in the snow. The explosion alerted the others, but it was too late. Wu Jin's team opened fire from concealed positions, using thermal imaging to see through the darkness. The Crimson Guard were trained to fight in honorable combat, one warrior against another. They had no experience with enemies who refused to show themselves. The Crimson Guard commander tried to adapt. He split his forces, thinking he could flank the humans. But Wu Jin had predicted that too. Tripwires triggered explosives. Remote-controlled machine guns activated when motion sensors detected movement. Speakers played recordings of human voices in different locations, making the Crimson Guard think they were surrounded by more enemies than actually existed. The psychological tactics were even more effective than the physical ones. Wu Jin used the research station's communication system to broadcast messages to the Crimson Guard in their own language. "You're fighting ghosts. Every shadow could be a human. Every sound could be a trap. How many of your brothers have died already? How many more will die before you realize you can't win?" The Crimson Guard warriors started making mistakes. They fired at false targets, wasting ammunition. They moved too cautiously, giving the humans time to relocate. They argued among themselves about tactics. The legendary discipline that made them famous began to crack under pressure. After 3 hours of fighting, the Crimson Guard commander called a retreat. Of the 100 warriors who landed, 37 were dead and 22 were wounded. The rest escaped back to their ships. They had faced 20 humans and lost. The Crimson Guard, who had never known defeat, had been beaten. The news spread through the Vrick's Empire like a shockwave. If the Crimson Guard couldn't beat humans, who could? Morale collapsed across multiple sectors. Soldiers who heard the story started questioning their orders. Some units surrendered without fighting when they learned humans were in the area. Intelligence officer Yun Ji worked in a council intelligence facility, monitoring Vrick's communications. She started noticing strange patterns in enemy transmissions. Vrick's soldiers were creating myths about humans, telling stories that got more exaggerated with each retelling. Humans who could see in complete darkness, humans who could smell fear, humans who never slept and never stopped hunting. None of it was literally true, but it didn't matter. The Vricks believed it. Fear had become its own weapon. Yunji compiled a report showing how human victories were affecting enemy morale across the entire empire. She presented it to council leadership and human commanders. "We're not just winning battles," she explained. "We're winning the war before battles even begin. The Vricks are defeated psychologically before the first shot is fired. Every human victory makes the next one easier because the enemy expects to lose." Scientist Da Yun sat in on the presentation. She had been studying human warfare for months now, and she was beginning to understand something profound. Humans didn't just fight with weapons and soldiers. They fought with stories, with reputation, with the fear they inspired in their enemies. Every battle was both a physical conflict and a propaganda opportunity. Every victory became a story that made the next victory easier. It was brilliant and terrible at the same time. The council representatives asked the obvious question: how do we know humans won't use these same tactics against us someday? Yunji had expected that question. We don't know. That's the risk we took when we invited them into this war. Humans are allies now because it serves their interests. But they're not like us. They don't think like us. War is woven into their culture so deeply that they can't separate it from who they are. General Taemin attended the meeting and spoke up. "You're right to be concerned. Humans are dangerous. We've always been dangerous, but we're also loyal. Earth joined this war because you asked for help, and we'll see it through to the end. After that?" He shrugged. "After that depends on how you treat us. Humans make excellent friends and terrible enemies. Which one do you want us to be?" The room went quiet. It was a subtle threat wrapped in a promise. The council had unleashed human violence against the Vricks. That same violence could be turned against anyone if humans felt betrayed or threatened. Commander Hyunwoo, who had been the first to contact Earth, spoke thoughtfully. "I think we need to accept what humanity has shown us. War isn't about technology or numbers or resources. War is about will. The side that wants victory more, that's willing to do whatever it takes to win, that side usually wins. The Vricks wanted to conquer. We wanted to survive. Both are strong motivations. But humans want to prove they're the best at fighting. That's a different kind of motivation entirely. It's not about survival or conquest. It's about excellence in warfare. And that makes them uniquely dangerous." Da-un nodded in agreement. "The Crimson Guard story is spreading on both sides now. Council soldiers are sharing it with pride like it's their victory too. Vricks soldiers are sharing it with fear. Some Vricks units are already requesting transfers away from sectors where humans operate. The psychological damage to their military is immense. We're watching an empire lose its will to fight in real time." The stories kept spreading. Every human soldier became a potential legend. Every battle became a story that would be told for generations. The galaxy was learning to fear humanity, and humans were learning that fear could be as powerful as any weapon. In a Vricks military academy, instructors changed their curriculum. They created new training modules specifically about fighting humans. They taught defensive tactics, psychological resilience, and how to recognize human deception. But it was too little, too late. The damage was already done. A young Vricks cadet asked his instructor a simple question. "Teacher, how do we beat the humans?" The instructor, a veteran of 300 battles, looked at the cadet for a long moment before answering honestly. "I don't know. They don't fight like anything we've faced before. They turn our strengths against us and exploit weaknesses we didn't know we had. They make us afraid of shadows and suspicious of our own tactics. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe you don't beat the humans. Maybe you just hope they decide you're not worth fighting. That conversation was recorded and leaked to Council intelligence. When Unji read it, she felt a chill run down her spine. The Vrix Empire had trained soldiers for generations to be fearless warriors. Now their own instructors were teaching them that humans couldn't be beaten. The war was changing, not because of territory gained or ships destroyed, because one side no longer believed they could win. And when an army stops believing in victory, defeat becomes inevitable. Humanity had been fighting for less than a year, but the psychological impact was already overwhelming. The legend of human warriors had grown beyond reality, becoming something bigger and more frightening than the actual capabilities of human forces, and the humans did nothing to discourage it. They let the stories spread. They let the fear grow, because they understood something the galaxy was just learning. Sometimes the most effective weapon isn't what you can do. It's what your enemies think you can do. The Vrix Empire made a desperate decision. They would throw everything they had at humanity in one massive attack. If they could destroy the human fleet, break their momentum, and prove that humans could be beaten, maybe the psychological damage could be reversed. Maybe their soldiers would find their courage again. Maybe the war could still be won. The Vrix High Admiral, an ancient warrior named Kreth, planned the operation personally. He gathered every available ship from across the Empire, 700 warships, the largest fleet the Vrix had assembled in a century. They would strike at the human forward base in the Helios sector, destroy the human forces there, and show the galaxy that the Vrix Empire was still powerful. Intelligence officer Yun Ji detected the fleet movements 3 days before the attack. She immediately reported to Human Command. Supreme Commander Boram studied the intelligence reports carefully. 700 ships against the 200 humans had in the Helios sector. The odds were worse than any battle humanity had fought so far. Most commanders would have ordered a retreat. Boram ordered an advance. "They're bringing their entire fleet to one location," she explained to her officers. "That's a mistake. They're concentrating their forces because they think numbers will win. But concentrated forces have concentrated weaknesses. We're going to turn their strength into a trap." Fleet Captain Jun Ho looked at the tactical display with concern. "Commander, even with superior tactics, 700 to 200 is too much. We'll be overwhelmed." Boram smiled coldly. "Not if they don't know we're only 200 ships. Start Phase 1. I want every trick we've developed deployed. Decoys, false signals, everything. Make them think they're facing 500 ships, not 200. The human fleet went to work. They deployed thousands of small drones that mimicked the energy signatures of real warships. They broadcast false communications on frequencies the Vrix were known to monitor. They created phantom fleets that showed up on sensors but didn't actually exist. The Vrix scouts detected what looked like a massive human force, much larger than expected. Kreth received the reports and felt satisfaction. The humans had gathered their forces to defend Helios. Good. That meant he would destroy most of their fleet in one battle. He ordered his 700 ships to jump into the Helios system in battle formation. When the Vrix fleet arrived, they found themselves facing chaos. The human ships were scattered across the system, not in defensive formation like Kreth expected. Worse, they were moving in seemingly random patterns that made targeting difficult. The phantom drones were mixed in with real ships, making it impossible to tell which targets were genuine. And strangest of all, large sections of the system were filled with debris, asteroids, and ice chunks that had been moved into specific positions. "What is this?" Kreth demanded. "Why is there so much debris in the battle zone?" His tactical officer had no answer. The debris hadn't been there when the scouts surveyed the system days ago. The humans had moved it there deliberately. But why? Boram watched from her flagship as the Vrix fleet tried to organize itself. She waited until most of their ships had entered the system, then gave the order. All ships, execute Broken Arrow Protocol. Authorization code, Thunderstorm. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The debris field wasn't random. Every piece had been positioned carefully. Hidden inside the larger chunks were mines, explosives, and weapons platforms controlled remotely by human operators. When BORAM gave the signal, thousands of hidden weapons activated at once. Mines detonated inside the VRIX formation. Missiles launched from inside asteroids. Railgun platforms that looked like space junk opened fire. The VRIX fleet, packed tightly in battle formation, had nowhere to go. Ships collided with each other, trying to avoid the attacks. Explosions rippled through their ranks. But that was just the opening move. Junho's carrier group had been hiding behind a moon, engines cold, waiting. Now they powered up and launched every fighter they had. 2,000 fighter craft swarmed into the confused VRIX formation, targeting specific ships with precision strikes. The fighters didn't try to destroy capital ships. Instead, they targeted sensors, communications arrays, and engine systems. They crippled ships rather than killed them, because crippled ships got in the way. The VRIX tried to respond, but their own numbers worked against them. With 700 ships packed into a relatively small space, their big guns couldn't fire without risk of hitting their own vessels. Their formations were designed for organized warfare, not chaotic close-range fighting. The humans had turned the VRIX's numerical superiority into a weakness. Commander In Su led a boarding operation that seemed insane. His team of 300 soldiers used small assault craft to land on the VRIX flagship while the battle raged around them. They fought through the ship's corridors, pushing toward the bridge. The VRIX crew outnumbered them 50-1, but the tight corridors of the ship meant only a few defenders could fight at once. In Su's team used every dirty trick humans had invented. Flashbang grenades that disoriented the VRIX. Smoke that blocked their vision. Shaped charges that blew through bulkheads. They moved fast, never giving the defenders time to organize. It was brutal close-quarters combat, the kind that humans had been practicing for thousands of years. When Insu's team reached the bridge, they found Kreth himself, surrounded by his command staff. The old warrior raised his weapon, ready to die fighting. Insu could have killed him. Instead, he stunned him with a neural disruptor and had his soldiers drag the unconscious admiral away. "Command, this is Insu. We have the VRIX High Admiral. He's alive. I repeat, we captured him alive." The news spread through both fleets instantly. The VRIX flagship had fallen. Their supreme commander was captured. For the VRIX warriors, it was a psychological blow worse than any weapon. The one thing that should have been impossible had just happened. Humans had boarded and captured the most heavily defended ship in the Empire. VRIX ship captains started making their own decisions without waiting for orders. Some tried to retreat, some kept fighting, some just stopped, not knowing what to do. The organized fleet became a confused mob of individual ships, each acting independently. BORAM saw the chaos and pressed her advantage. All human forces full assault. Break them completely. The 200 human warships, no longer hiding or using tricks, charged into the disorganized VRIX fleet. They moved in coordinated groups, targeting isolated enemy ships. They used their railguns and missiles without mercy. They exploited every gap in the enemy formation. The VRIX, demoralized and leaderless, tried to mount a defense, but it was too late. The battle lasted 9 hours. When it ended, the VRIX Empire had lost 431 ships. Another 150 were crippled so badly they had to be abandoned. Only about 120 VRIX ships managed to escape back to faster-than-light speed. The human fleet lost 47 ships. 3,000 soldiers died, including In Su, who was killed during the fighting on the VRIX flagship after successfully capturing Kreth. His last words, recorded on his helmet camera, were simple. "Mission accomplished. Get the Admiral to command." BORAM stood in her command center, looking at the battle reports. She felt no joy in the victory. 3,000 of her people were dead. Insu had been a friend since their academy days. The cost of war was always measured in lives, and no tactical victory could bring those lives back. But she also knew what this victory meant. The Vrix had thrown their largest fleet at humanity and failed. Not just failed, but been utterly destroyed. The psychological impact would be enormous. She was right. Across the Vrix Empire, soldiers heard about the battle and despaired. Their mightiest fleet had fallen. Their best admiral had been captured alive, humiliated in a way that no Vrix warrior should ever endure, and the humans had done it all with a force less than a third of their size. Vrix military units started surrendering without fighting. Some colonies declared neutrality and refused to support the war effort. Several outer sector governors sent secret messages to the council, asking about terms for peace. The empire that had fought for 300 years was collapsing from within. The council representatives visited Bo-Ram after the battle. They came to congratulate her on the victory, but also to express concern. One Luminian counselor named Velsa spoke carefully. "Commander Bo-Ram, your victory was impressive, but we're troubled by the brutality of your tactics. Capturing the enemy admiral alive, using him as a psychological weapon, turning his soldiers' pride against them. These methods seem cruel." Bo-Ram looked at the counselor with tired eyes. "Would you prefer we killed him? Would that be less cruel?" That's not what I meant." "War is cruel," Bo-Ram said flatly. "There's no gentle way to do it. You asked humans for help because you couldn't win this war yourselves. We're winning it for you, but you don't like how we do it. That's fine. You don't have to like it. But don't pretend there's a kind way to fight. Every method is cruel. We just choose methods that end the war faster, which means fewer total deaths in the long run." Velsa had no response to that. The council representatives left, still uncomfortable with human methods, but unable to argue with the results. Scientist Da-Wun reviewed the battle data with Commander Hyun-woo. They watched recordings of the fighting, studying human tactics. Da-Wun pointed at a specific moment when human fighters were coordinating an attack on a Vrix cruiser. "Look at this. They're communicating with each other constantly, adjusting their plan in real time, but there's no hierarchy. They're not waiting for orders from above. Each pilot makes decisions independently, trusting their teammates to adapt. It's like watching a flock of birds move, everyone following the same instinct without needing a leader." Hyun-woo nodded. "That's what makes them so effective. Our forces wait for commands to flow down from above. By the time orders reach individual soldiers, the situation has already changed. Human soldiers are trained to think for themselves, to make tactical decisions on their own. It makes them unpredictable and adaptable. It also makes them dangerous," Da-Un added quietly. "A species where every individual is trained to fight independently, to make life and death decisions without waiting for authority, to value initiative over obedience. What happens when those soldiers come home after the war? How does a society control people like that?" Hyun-woo considered the question. Maybe that's why humans are so good at war, because they never really stop fighting. Even in peacetime, they compete, they struggle, they challenge authority. War is just the most extreme version of what they do naturally. In a prison cell on a council space station, High Admiral Kreth sat alone. He had been treated well, given food and medical care. No one tortured him or even threatened him. The humans were polite and professional. Somehow, that made it worse. A human officer came to interview him. It was General Tae-min, the same human who had first offered Earth's help to the Council. He sat down across from Kreth and studied him for a moment. "Why?" Kreth asked in broken Council common. "Why do you fight this way?" Tae-min understood the question. "Because we fight to win, not to prove we're honorable, not to follow ancient traditions, not to look brave. We fight to win as quickly and efficiently as possible. Everything else is secondary." "You have no honor." "We have honor," Tae-min corrected. We just define it differently than you do. To us, honor means protecting our people and completing our mission. The methods don't matter as much as the results." Kreth looked at the human general, seeing something in his eyes that frightened him more than the battle had. Certainty. Taemin wasn't cruel or evil. He was just absolutely certain that his way was right. There was no doubt, no hesitation, no guilt. He fought the way he did because he believed it was necessary. That certainty, that unwavering belief in their own methods, was what made humans truly dangerous. News of the battle spread across the galaxy. Species that had remained neutral suddenly wanted to meet with human ambassadors. Some sought protection. Others wanted to ensure they would never become human enemies. The balance of galactic power had shifted in a single day. The Vrix Empire called for an emergency session with their ruling council. For the first time in their history, they discussed surrender, not strategic withdrawal, not negotiated peace, surrender. The war ended not with a final battle, but with a message. The Vrix Imperial Council sent a transmission to the Galactic Council requesting formal surrender negotiations. 300 years of fighting ended in a single day because one side could no longer find the will to continue. The galaxy was shocked. The mighty Vrix Empire, which had conquered dozens of worlds and fought the Council to a standstill for 3 centuries, was giving up. And they were giving up to a species that had been in space for less than a decade. Humanity had joined the war only 2 years ago, but those 2 years had been enough to break an empire. Ambassador Chan Mi represented Earth at the peace conference. She was a diplomat, not a soldier, and she approached the negotiations very differently than the military had approached the war. The Council expected humans to demand territory, resources, or tribute from the defeated Vrix. Chan Mi surprised everyone by asking for none of those things. Earth has no interest in Vrix worlds, she explained to the assembled representatives. We didn't fight this war for conquest or wealth. We fought because the Galactic Council asked for help, and humanity believes in honoring its commitments. What we want is simple. We want recognition as a galactic power. We want a voice in council decisions, and we want guarantees that no species will threaten human interests or territory without facing consequences. A Vrix negotiator named Thrak, one of the few military leaders who still commanded respect, spoke bitterly. You want us to fear you forever. Chanmi met his eyes steadily. No, we want you to respect us. Fear is temporary. It fades when threats are forgotten. Respect lasts. We want the galaxy to know that humanity keeps its promises, honors its allies, and doesn't lose wars. That's worth more than any amount of territory. The peace treaty was signed 3 weeks later. The terms were surprisingly moderate. The Vrix Empire would remain intact, but would withdraw from all disputed territories. They would pay reparations to the Council, but the amounts were manageable, designed to punish but not destroy their economy. Most importantly, the Vrix would recognize human sovereignty and agree to non-aggression pacts with both Earth and the Council. When the treaty was announced, reactions across the galaxy were mixed. Some praised humanity's restraint. Others worried it was a strategic mistake to leave the Vrix Empire standing. But Chanmi understood something that pure military thinking might have missed. A humiliated enemy would eventually seek revenge. An enemy that was treated with dignity in defeat might become a future ally. The Council convened to discuss the new reality of galactic politics. Every council member understood that everything had changed. Commander Hyunwoo, who had first contacted Earth 2 years ago, addressed the assembly. When I first met humans, I thought they were primitive. I was wrong. They're not primitive. They're focused. Every aspect of their civilization has been shaped by conflict. While we were exploring art, philosophy, and science, humans were perfecting warfare. Not because they're evil or violent by nature, but because their world made them that way. Earth is a harsh planet by our standards. It has extreme weather, dangerous animals, and limited resources. Humanity evolved in an environment that rewarded aggression and adaptability. They became the ultimate survivors. Scientist Da-Yun added her own observations. I've spent 2 years studying human culture and biology. What I've learned frightens and fascinates me. Humans don't have natural weapons like claws or armor. They're weaker than most species their size. But they have something more valuable. They have imagination and persistence. They imagine threats that don't exist yet and prepare for them. They persist in pursuing goals long after other species would give up. That combination makes them incredibly dangerous and incredibly valuable as allies. The real question on everyone's mind was asked by Korel, the ancient Luminian who led the council. What will humanity do now that the war is over? They've proven themselves as warriors. They've gained respect and recognition. But will they be content with peace, or will they seek new conflicts? It was a fair question, and it deserved an honest answer. Chanmi responded carefully. Humans are capable of peace. We have long periods of peace on Earth, sometimes lasting generations. But we're also capable of war, and we're very good at it. The question isn't whether we'll fight again. The question is whether we'll fight as your allies or as your enemies. That choice belongs to the Council as much as it does to us. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't threatening anyone, but they weren't pretending to be harmless either. They were powerful, and they expected to be treated accordingly. Over the next months, Earth established its first permanent embassies across Council space. Director Yansu oversaw the embassy program, carefully selecting ambassadors who could represent humanity's interests while building positive relationships with other species. It was delicate work. Humans had gained respect through military victory, but now they needed to prove they could be good neighbors in peacetime. Alien visitors came to Earth in increasing numbers. Some were dignitaries seeking alliances, others were scholars wanting to study human culture. All of them left with complicated feelings. Earth was beautiful and diverse, with art, music, and philosophy that rivaled anything in Council space. But it was also a world that glorified warriors, built monuments to battles, and taught its children military history as a core subject. Earth was a civilization that had never stopped preparing for the next war, even during peace. Captain Jiwon, who had been humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council, was promoted to admiral and given command of Earth's defensive fleets. She addressed a graduation ceremony at the new Space Force Academy, speaking to the first generation of human officers who would grow up in a galaxy that knew about Earth. "You are inheriting a reputation," she told the graduates. "Every species in the galaxy knows what humans can do in war. Some fear us, some respect us, some want to test us. Your job isn't to prove we're the best warriors in the galaxy. We already did that. Your job is to prove we can be trusted, that we use our strength wisely, and that we honor our commitments. The previous generation won the war. Your generation must win the peace." But winning peace was harder than winning war. Old conflicts on Earth, suppressed during the excitement of joining galactic civilization, started resurfacing. Different nations argued about how to manage Earth's new status. Some wanted aggressive expansion into space. Others wanted to focus on domestic development. Some feared that contact with aliens would destroy human culture. Others embraced the opportunity to learn from other species. General Taimin, now retired from active service, spoke at a global summit addressing these concerns. For thousands of years, humans fought each other because we were the only people we knew. We competed over limited resources on one small planet. Now we know we're not alone. The galaxy is vast, with resources and opportunities beyond anything we imagined. We can keep fighting each other over scraps, or we can work together and claim our place among the stars. The choice is ours. His speech resonated with many, but not everyone. Some extremist groups argued that humanity should conquer the galaxy, that humans were naturally superior warriors and should rule over weaker species. These groups were small but vocal. They concerned both human leadership and alien observers. In the Vrix Empire, rebuilding had begun. The empire that once dreamed of galactic conquest was now focused on internal recovery. But something interesting was happening among Vrix soldiers. Veterans who had fought against humans started sharing their experiences differently. Instead of just talking about defeat and fear, they began analyzing what they had learned. A Vrix military academy invited a human officer, Colonel Mina, to give a lecture on human tactics. She accepted, becoming the first human to visit a Vrix military installation. The Vrix officers listened carefully as she explained human strategic thinking, asked sharp questions, and took detailed notes. At the end, one officer asked, "If we had known these tactics, could we have won?" Mina considered the question honestly. Possibly. Tactics can be learned, but tactics aren't why we won. We won because our entire civilization was ready for war before we ever left Earth. You would need to change your culture, your training, your way of thinking. By the time you did that, you wouldn't be Vrix anymore. You'd be something else. That exchange was recorded and spread throughout the Empire. It sparked debate about what the Vrix wanted to become. Some argued for maintaining traditional values. Others pushed for reform and adaptation. The war with humans had changed the Vrix Empire in ways that would take generations to fully understand. Meanwhile, human explorers pushed deeper into unexplored space. They found new worlds, contacted new species, and brought back knowledge that enriched both Earth and the Council. But they also brought back warnings. The galaxy was bigger than anyone realized, and there were things in the dark spaces between stars that even humans might not be ready to face. On Earth, monuments were built to honor those who died in the war. Admiral Insu, who captured the Vrix admiral before dying himself, received the highest military honors. Sergeant Dong Hyun, who held a position alone for 6 hours, became a symbol of human determination. Pilot So Ra, who survived behind enemy lines for 3 weeks, inspired a generation of new recruits. Their stories became part of human mythology, tales told to teach courage and sacrifice. But the most interesting change happened among the youngest generation. Children who grew up knowing aliens existed saw the universe differently than their parents had. To them, conflict with other species wasn't inevitable. It was just one possibility among many. They learned alien languages, studied alien cultures, and made friends with beings from other worlds. They represented humanity's future, a future where war might not define who humans were. 5 years after the war ended, a joint council and human research team made contact with a new species in a distant sector. The species was primitive but developing quickly, showing signs of future space travel capability. The Council wanted to approach them carefully, learning from the mistakes made during first contact with humanity. The question arose, who should make first contact? Council representatives with their peaceful approach, or humans with their understanding of developing civilizations? The decision was made to send a mixed team. Commander Hyun Woo, who first met humans, would lead the Council delegation. Admiral Ji-won would lead the human team. Together, they would show this new species what the galaxy could offer, the wisdom of ancient peaceful civilizations combined with the strength of humans who had earned their place through determination and skill. As their ships approached the new species' homeworld, Ji-won reflected on how far humanity had come. 2 years of war had established Earth as a galactic power. 5 years of peace had proven humans could be more than warriors. But the reputation remained. Every species knew the story of when humans joined the war. They knew what happened when humanity decided to fight. That knowledge served as both shield and burden. No one wanted to fight humans, which meant conflicts could be resolved through negotiation rather than violence. But humans could never truly relax. They were always being watched, always being judged, always being measured against their reputation. Jiwan didn't mind. Humans had spent thousands of years proving themselves to each other. Now they had a chance to prove themselves to the galaxy. The challenge was bigger, but the principles were the same. Work hard, stay strong, honor your commitments, never give up. The galaxy had trembled when humans joined the war. They trembled because humans were unknown, unpredictable, and apparently unstoppable. But now the galaxy was learning something else about humanity. They were also curious, creative, and capable of building as impressively as they destroyed. The war had shown what humans could do when pushed to fight. The peace was showing what humans could do when given a chance to cooperate. Both were impressive in their own ways. As the first contact mission began, Ji-Wan thought about her speech at the academy. Winning the peace was harder than winning the war, but humanity had never chosen the easy path. They had evolved on a harsh world, survived countless conflicts, and risen from a single planet to become a galactic power in less than a decade. Whatever challenges the future brought, whatever new conflicts arose, whatever mysteries the galaxy held, humanity would face them the same way they faced everything, with determination, creativity, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy had learned to respect that. Some species still feared it, others admired it, but everyone recognized it. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars not through conquest or dominance, but through proving that when it mattered most, when the stakes were highest, humans found a way to win. That was the real reason the galaxy trembled when humans joined the war. Not because humans were cruel or violent or evil, but because humans were survivors who had turned survival into an art form. And in a dangerous galaxy, that made them the most valuable allies and the most dangerous enemies. The war was over. The peace had begun. But everyone knew the truth. Humanity's story in the galaxy was just beginning, and whatever came next, it would be interesting. Because boring was one thing humans would never be.